start with this man. He certainly isn't the only one, but he becomes an important perpetrator. You all know him, particularly those of you in high school. How many people are in high school in this room? Anyone in high school? Anybody go to high school? Okay, so anyone that went to high school, you had to deal with ERNEST, who is a father of anthropology. This man was best known for classification of species, phylum, genus. He just classified everything. Now look at the date. This becomes an important date because this is right in the middle of the period of enslavement. And I just want you to know, look at the way he's dressed, because whenever you see people like this, that dress like this, you should get concerned. Ever look at that. You'll see. You'll see. So, he starts describing human beings, but understand he's describing them because he's part of those institutions. Now, science that's complicit to remove the cognitive. In order to do that, you justify your behavior and you relabel the people to fit your behavior towards them. So now the difference here is he's espousing science. He's now saying that what I'm asserting here is a scientific truth. He described Homo americanus, and who might that be? No, those are natives. Now let's see what he says about them. He says these people are reddish, choleric, obstinate, contented, and regulated by customs. Homo europaeus, he said, is white, fickle, sanguine, blue-eyed, gentle, and governed by laws. Homo asiaticus is sallow, grave, dignified, avaricious, and ruled by opinion. And Homo Afro as black, phlegmatic, cunning, lazy, lustful, careless, and governed by caprice. These insights into what he defined as racial characteristics became more fixed than the races themselves. But here's the most important thing. There is not a shred of science here. Nothing scientific. But my students, well, Dr. Degruy, this is 1707 to 1778. I said, but do you not hear these same attributions to black people? And you see, we have to believe this about black people. Even black people believe this about black people. And it then justifies what we've done to them. Don't they deserve to be enslaved? I just told you scientifically that they're cunning, lazy, lustful, careless, and governed by caprice. They need to be enslaved. But no one checked his vita. Linnaeus, after 1 week, received his Ph.D. for a 13-page dissertation from the Dutch University of Harderwijk, which one historian of science designated as a mail-order institution. The University of Harderwijk was known for selling degrees, and there is a saying in the Netherlands for a person whose scientific knowledge is questionable, oh, he's from the University of Harderwijk. Then we have his colleague, Johann Friedrich Blumenbach. This is a man who looked at skulls. He basically took a bunch of skulls and decided he was going to attribute something to them. He's also responsible for coining the term Caucasian. I highly recommend, after you read my book, to read Nell Irvin Painter's book called The History of White People. It was a New York bestseller. It's an amazing book. Amazing. Based on this book alone, they're going to have to rewrite history. This is a quote from him. He says, for in the first place in stock displays, he's talking about Caucasians, the most beautiful form of the skull, this is an important part, from which is a mean and primeval type, the others diverge by most easy gradations, on both sides, the two ultimate extremes, one side the Mongolian, the other Ethiopian. Besides, it is white in color. Now he's talking about a skull. Anybody ever met a skull that wasn't? Which we may fairly assume to have been the primitive color of mankind. So this man said, ooh, skull, white people were the beginning. No science, but no one checked his vita either. Blumenbach got a medical degree from the University of Göttingen after submitting a 15-page long dissertation, the result of 1 year study with an older professor who owned an extraordinarily large and disordered natural history collection. Now what becomes important about this is this next statement. Blumenbach, along with races of Britain and the United States began to rank facial characteristics and skin color hierarchically, beginning not surprisingly with white as superior and most beautiful, thus identifying beauty as a scientific category. Now what's important about this? They linked being white to being superior and to being scientifically the proof of it. So anyone that did not fall within that were considered subhuman, including Irish folks. The wonderful book called How the Irish Became White. Because the Irish people were perceived as less than other Europeans until they got the label of white, which took them out of that and away from any other people of color. This becomes important. I'm not going to read this, but what she says in her book is that the concept of whiteness did not exist in antiquity. Nobody walked around talking about I'm white. Now we're going ancient, way back. And nobody was walking around talking about white. That is a new notion that was constructed that produced white supremacy. Not until the 18th century did an obsession with whiteness flourish with the German invention of the notion of Caucasian beauty. This theory made Northern Europeans into Saxons, Anglo-Saxons, and Teutons, envisioned as uniquely handsome and natural rulers. But what is conspicuously missing from the history is the long history of slavery within Europe. And one of the most famous slaves, St. Patrick, Ireland's patron saint, was enslaved. So when we look at these, we begin to recognize that all of this gets built around this idea of white supremacy, which you must say because you've got to justify what you're doing to all the rest of the folks. We also know that there was the eugenics movement which started here in the United States. That was the idea of basically breeding better humans, trying to get rid of those bad Southern European genes, those dark people, the Africans, the Latinos, the Jews. We got to get rid of the bad blood. And you see, this becomes the foundation for genocide. An inherent contradiction. And the contradiction is the notion of freedom and democracy. And at the exact same time that we are teaching the concept of freedom and democracy, we are committing genocide against the native population here, and we are enslaving people of Africa.